Welcome to Trail Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Shimmons. Thanks for coming back to our Global Ultra Trail show. This week, it's our highs and lows of 2025 show, joined by Krissi and Ricki, OGs in Trail Talk game. So we're going to get into that very shortly. Got to thank our sponsors for the last time in 2025. Wearwear, Antrums and X Miles. Links are in the description for discounts and nothing else to say. Let's roll the show. I'm joined by Ricki and Krissi, trail talkers for life at this point. This time last year, we were sitting doing something very similar. I rewatched it the other day just to see how much is, what were we talking about this time last year? And it just feels like so much has passed since then. Are you psyched about the year that's just happened? What about you, Krissi? Kick us off. How have you felt about the year in general before we get into our highs and lows?
Yeah, I feel like so much has happened, but it feels so far away from me already. I feel like I remember the past few months and everything else feels like eons ago. I think there's been so much change and growth, both personally and in the sport. But I'm ready to move on and ready to start 2026 and kind of have a fresh outlook on things.
Yeah, we were chatting just before I hit record and was saying about how much younger, unfortunately, we all looked 12 months ago. To be honest, actually, Krissi, I don't think you're not showing the age of the past 12 months, but Ricki and I definitely look older.
Speak for yourself. Ricki looks great with his earrings.
I didn't say he didn't look great. I just said that he doesn't look as young as as 12 months ago. Ricki, what about you? How do you feel about the year that's just happened? Lots of highs and lows.
Yeah, to be honest, so many highs, really. I'll say that, so many highs, but it's funny because you're trying to pinpoint your highs and your lows for the year, and you're trying to look back on the year, and you're saying, was that this year? Because that feels like it was ages ago. That feels like it was 2 years ago. Do you know what I mean? So much has happened this year that it's hard to pinpoint when exactly it was or when it happened exactly, and it's a bit of a blur at times.
Yeah, looking back at some of the, if you go back to Feb of this year and we ran the Dartmoor 50K, I saw pictures from that when I was scrolling through Instagram. It seems like 3 years ago, not 11 months ago. But look, it's been mostly a great year. It's been a really interesting and progressive year in the sport as well. So we're going to get into our highs and lows and our takeaways, both from the sport and also personally in our own running. So I'll kick it off and I'll pass it over to you, Krissi. But one of the things that stood out for me just looking through the year is how great some of the female performances have been, touching on Ruth Croft winning UTMB, but also being the first female to win OCC, CCC and now UTMB, which is just massive. We've always talked about Ruth and her range from sky running right through to now kind of nailing the UTMB, the ultimate 100-mile loop on her second go. Wasn't her second go? So just an amazing performance there. What did you have, and what's your thoughts on that, Krissi?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever we've talked about who could hit all three of those UTMB Chamonix finale distances, it's always been women. I think the next one that can do it is probably Katie in terms of having that versatility. When I looked back at her year, it was just another proving point at how good she is, no matter what distance she's training for. And so it's really exciting because for a long time we talked about, the men's CR and that time mark and who was going to get under it. And so this feels kind of like the next narrative about UTMB. And yeah, we love to see it. Also, going off of that point about Katie, I think one of my highs was the Katie and Jim story, the American in Europe story seems to continue. It was, I think, a lot maybe bigger of a story when it first started, when we first started talking about how Jim was doing at States and how he was going to transfer that to training for UTMB. And so it feels like maybe we didn't hear as much about him this year, especially with kind of bit of injury in the beginning of the year or kind of beginning, middle of year. But both Walmsley and Katie Scheid have had really banner performances when they needed to this year, both getting OCC, sorry, restart. Walmsley getting OCC, both of them getting long trail world champs. Walmsley's epic battle at Chianti with Kiki and Vincent, and then Katie also with Hard Rock and Mute. And as I was saying, her versatility then showed with a second at Sierras and all. So the ability of Americans to do well in Europe, but I think we're still seeing that takes training in Europe and really dedicating themselves to European style races more so than maybe like kind of faster, buttery American style races.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like actually, do you know what? To touch on what both of you are after talking about, you're after talking about Ruth, and then you're after talking about Jim, right? And then if you kind of look at what they've both done, if you look at what it takes for somebody to go and win all of those three races, like OCC, CCC, and UTMB, right? And then something similar happened to Jim this year, where he dropped out of was because he was training for long trail at the Worlds, and then he dropped down, and there was a few injuries here, there, and everywhere, and he decided to do OCC, and it was like, there's no way he's going to win OCC. It's like, that's not what he does. That's not in his wheelhouse. I know he's fast. I know he's this, that, and the other, but he's gone up against like real machines that are specific to that race, you know, sky runners, the best of the best, and he still beat everybody there, you know what I mean? And like, if you think about that, the caliber, he's kind of like, after nearly crowning himself like the best of all time, almost, you know, with a performance like that, and then the Worlds. But how good does that say Ruth is? That Ruth is able to do that in all those three distances. Like, that's insane, hey? That you can win OCC, CCC, and UTMB. That is, like, I don't know, that's GOAT material. Like, that's GOAT material. Because there's no way a Courtney Dauwalter could do that. Not in a million years could she do that. You know what I mean? She wouldn't have the arsenal to do all those three kinds of races. So I think that's, like, they're two great highs, I think. For me, my high is, like, he's so back. It's Francesco. Because that's what I was saying. This year feels like it's been so long, because if you remember how good Poopy was at the start of this year, he was insane. He was winning everything. He was after signing with Hoka, and he was filling his back pocket with cash for winning all these races. He was winning everything. And it was like this amazing little story where he got his golden ticket for Western States, and he handed off his ticket, and he was up in the distance all the time. And then it was, right, I'm going for CCC. And it was like, has he the stones? Has he the skill? Has he the stuff to win CCC? And he annihilated everybody at CCC. So, like, Francesco's win at CCC was my high of the year, I think.
That's some great points. So, like, going back to what you said, Krissi, like, Katie's second at Sierras and Al kind of doubles up with a low of the year, which was Joyline Chepngeno and her doping. And then, Ricki, you're mentioning on Poopy. Poopy was actually the first guest interview on Trail Talk in 2025, and like, I didn't even have him listed in my notes, but such an amazing year that he had. He also, like, absolutely crushed Canyons as well with one of the performances of the year as well, like really high UTMB index score from that race. So no, that was a good shout. And then maybe I'll throw in another low here. There's definitely more highs than lows, and Ricki, we'll come to you on this one because I know you love this part of the sport, but this time last year, gym bros didn't even know what a backyard ultra was. And now it's their sport. Now it's their sport. What do you think of that?
What do I think about what? What do I think of backyard ultras? Is this what you're asking me?
Backyard ultras, like, gym bros doing them, Nick Bear, BPN, you run with that whatever way you want.
Yeah, like, it's kind of like the High Rocks thing too, you know what I mean? It's like, it's High Rocks, and every influencer on the planet is doing High Rocks now, and it's like, it's taken over at the minute. And then backyard is getting more popular. Look, I don't want to ever say that if you're into backyard ultras, right? If you're in that scene, you may think that's the best type of format going and they love it and they absolutely love doing it. But for me personally, I don't enjoy the backyard ultra stuff at all. I don't enjoy watching it. I definitely don't want to participate in it, because it's not my kind of thing. I look at the backyard ultra as it's a sleeping competition, really. It's like who can go the longest time without sleep. That's pretty much what it is, you know what I mean? And it goes on for like 5 or 6 days now because they are incredible at running loops for fucking unbelievable long durations and amounts of time. But look, for me, it ain't going to be a high for me in the year anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah, and there was no need to mention High Rocks. It's not Ultra Trail. We're talking about Ultra Trail, and backyard ultras are part of Ultra, maybe not Ultra Trail, but that's why it gets a mention. Regardless of whether we like it or not, it's still something that stood out from 2025 as, we had records broken in the backyard ultra. Phil Gore, the Australian, absolutely crushed it, went out the next day and ran, I don't know, was it 15 or 16 minute park run after breaking a record at, I think it was Dead Cow was the name of the Dead Cow Gully, maybe was it the name of the backyard ultra.
What does that tell you? What does that tell you? If you ran Western States or if you ran UTMB as hard as you could and you tried to win that race, I guarantee you wouldn't be able to run a 5k park run the next day. No fucking way. You wouldn't be able to do it. Like, these boys are only walking around the loop, hey. They know how to do it so well that they just get a little bit tired, and when after a night's sleep, they're fine. Their legs are fine.
Hey, didn't there used to be a bit of a miler the day after states, right before the ceremony? Like Wardian and a couple people would do a mile race off of states' legs.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember seeing that. Yeah, you're right.
Krissi, I could go on about the backyard ultra thing because we've lit a fire under Ricki. He's here. But what do you think about backyard ultras, how it's evolved this year, gym bros thinking it's now their part of the sport? And like, regardless of what we say about it, there'll be a percentage of the gym bros that didn't know about ultra running. They found out about backyard ultras because of Nick Bear, and now they're going, oh, maybe what's UTMB? What's a 50k? Maybe I'll try a 50k. So like, some positive will come from it too that'll feed into the side of the sport that we're into.
Not everybody has the same entry to the sport, so I'm all for people finding their niche and what gets them excited and shows them, about the greater sport in general. Certainly there's a prevalence, and I think it's, definitely a social media driven prevalence of gym bros, hybrid boys, like getting into trail and ultra. And I hope that is both positive for the sport and positive for them, and understanding kind of really like full holistic fitness versus like these very contrived kind of sets of exercises. But you're right. Your point, backyards really kind of started to grow and evolve. I think it kind of needed to. It could have stayed the way it was, very niche, very quiet. But I think as kind of awareness grows about all parts of sport, and we've seen more coverage of backyard style races, is inevitable in a way. I don't know if it was inevitable, who would pick themselves up into the sport, but it is kind of cool to just see what human endurance means in that setting, and how, different boundaries are getting pushed versus just speed and tech.
Look, as the sport grows, it can't all grow from the same point. Like, the whole running is growing because people of all different backgrounds and interests are coming into it, and this is just another way that running is growing. Next up on the highs, or maybe will we jump into maybe a personal high just to mix it up a little bit? Personal high, States trip. Ricki, come on.
Yeah.
That was a massive high for the year. Like, what was it? About 2.5 weeks for me, way longer for you. Broken Arrow, Trail Con, Western States, getting to crew you and then pace you. What an experience that was. That was definitely one of the it's actually top of the highlights list for me whenever I was thinking like what good happened this year. So that was just absolutely amazing. Shout out to Chris and Michelle also for putting us up, which was just made it a lot more possible. But what did you think, Ricki?
Yeah, but even like having Krissi here on the pod as well, because Krissi was there getting the final like couple of miles live on like on Instagram and everything, and it was super cool. Like, and it's funny, it's because like every day I come home from work, I've got a cabinet with all my like trophies and stuff like that, and medals and this, that, and the other, and like I recently put the belt buckle that I got for Western States on a belt and now put it back in the thing, and it looks class. It looks even better on a belt, if you know what I mean. And I mean, like every time I see that, it brings me back, you know. I got to spend a month with Chris and Michelle over in Reno, getting the train in Reno, getting the train on the Tahoe Rim Trail, getting to run out to go out to what is it called? The Olympic Valley. Yeah, getting out to Olympic Valley. And then you coming over, hiring the car, driving me around everywhere, going over to see Broken Arrow Sky Race the week before, you know what I mean? I didn't go to TrailCon, but I was around the village and everything like that. And look, it's the dream race, right? Like I've dreamt about running that. You've probably dreamt about running that since you got into trail running, you know, and having it as a shared experience, you and me running like 35, 40K on the trails together. I'll never forget that. Like that's a high that is going to be very, very hard to top.
You mentioned about Broken Arrow and stuff. Like one of the highlights for me was that look from Killian. In the vertical race, just a little glance over, like tip of the hat. There's Aaron and Ricki. I mean, that's a highlight for me. I wrote that down. That's in my list.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Kiki's biggest fan, huh?
Yeah, I think the photo I took of you two kind of sitting on the rocks waiting for the VK to start as I was going up to the top was like one of those like kind of core memories for me from that week. Just the two of you and your like joy and excitement and like just the ability to be here for all of that. I was really excited for you to, you know, maybe Aaron, a bit of a Broken Arrow skeptic, just to kind of see the environment and just see the community that, you know, kind of 10-day period brings together. Super special to kind of share that with you guys and have you experience it all the way through, you know, Ricki being first master and first Hoka athlete to finish at States this year for the men.
And I had to really cram as much training as I could because I was coming back from my big low of the year, which was the double ankle roll at Ultra Trail Australia, and get back to running well enough to be able to pace you. And that was like by far the longest run that I had done since UTA. So it was a great way to come back. Maybe it was a wee bit too much, but got it done. And it was the start of essentially the rest of my season. Krissi, we'll come to you for a personal high.
It was definitely on my list. I think maybe to go along with that theme, for me, it was these handful of events that brought the community together, that I got to connect with people in trail running, meet new people, build those relationships, and just kind of share the joy of the sport. You know, for me, that was like Broken Arrow, TrailCon States, like that whole time. You know, as usual, the kind of UTMB Chamonix week and actually TRE recently as well. I think all of those moments, like just they get me really amped and excited about what's coming in the sport, like what's been accomplished, and really give me a bit of momentum.
Just on the fact that Chris is here as well, and we have an American on the show, right? It's like, you know, we over here in Europe, like we give America a bit of shit and the Americans give us a bit of shit. But I mean, to be in America and experience how ye do trail running, I mean, Aaron, I speak for both of us. I think when we got over there, we were all in on it. Like, it's a totally different experience you get from like UTMB when you're at something like Broken Arrow or Western States. But I mean, they're so unique in their own way, but so cool. Like, I'm all in on America. Like, I always knew I'd love America. Like, I love the big trucks. I love the big attitude, you know what I mean? And like, I think America know how to bring it.
Yeah, look, whenever I go to America, I just want to do American things. And you talk about putting the buckle on a belt. Is that the leather belt that cost you a fortune at Reno Rodeo?
Yeah, the very one, yeah.
Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, but I'm gonna counter that with a low, which is an American, which is not an American, but which is American. And that is the doubling down on Americanization of ultra trail content. And I think we felt that at UTMB and then also around Worlds, which I think was, I don't actually think it was maybe a deliberate move. I think it was more a subconscious reaction to the global kind of feeling on kind of nationalism or something. I don't want to go negative on that, but I mean, I thought that would sort of ruin some content for me this year. I hope it's not going to be the case next year, but time will tell. As an American, Krissi, did you feel that? Did you feel like the content was more American this year?
Yeah, I think definitely with the growth of media and how it's happening here, I think those, I don't want to name names of those groups, but I would say the bigger space they take up and kind of the more they focus on what they know the best, the more that is what we see. And so I don't disagree. I think I agree that like starting at kind of like world champ, certainly like UTMB as well, like an inundation of too much overall instead of focusing on maybe just quality and just the top stories. We're trying to just cover everything possible and like overextend ourselves. But and then I would say also with TRE being, fresh in my mind and being kind of an American trail running community that was at that conference, we saw like another level of US media growth, right? We saw US media groups in trail running trying to then start doing other categories of content. And I just wonder, if there's more momentum here, more kind of excitement, more funding. And that's why it's growing so fast here. Whereas maybe Europe is a bit more like traditional TV focused. And a lot of, maybe our generations, the generations below us, they aren't really watching TV in the same way anymore. So everything kind of does have to be internet based. And maybe that's like slowing the growth of non-US trail media a bit. I'm not quite sure the answer to that, but I see, I see the problems that you're seeing.
Yeah, but America don't know how to do it any other way. They don't know how to do it any other way. That's how they do it. They just go loud and proud and look at me. And like let's say Team America, you know what I mean, at the World Champs, and I always think of like Team America. would say like they just come with the stars and stripes, you know what I mean? And they're kitting out their athletes in the Nike ACG cotton holy top that, it looks crazy in a scene like the World Champs. But it's like when America brought the All-Stars to the Olympics in the basketball. Do you know what I mean? It creates theatre. It's very, very theatrical. And if you're a fan of the sport, and I don't care if you're American or not, you love that shit, hey? Like, I love seeing Jim Walmsley there and all the boys and them all in the Nike ACG tops. And it's the stars and the stripes. And it's like, look at us, it's America. They've brought the best team in the world. We're the best in the world at everything. You know what I mean? And it brings a super hype to the sport. And yes, it can be a bit too much at times and a bit too much for like other countries, maybe, like France or someone like that, where they're a bit more subtle and so more like assassins in their own way. But I mean, I love all the hype that America brings. I love it.
I don't think it's to say that there's anything wrong with it. I think that, like, you know, the sport is lifting as a whole, but I think to Erin's point, we need to counterbalance that. We need to figure out how to get other stories out there as well in their own way.
Yeah.
It's just like we're sharing the same language, and there's just more content coming from that largest piece of land that speaks English. It's our job to shout louder. You said something, Ricki, and it made me think, how much would ACG have loved if Jim had worn the waffle top?
I'd say if that, like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I'm sure there was talk about it. Like, I'm sure they asked, would you fancy wearing this top? And I'm guessing Jim, because he's, I don't know, loyal to Hoka, or maybe Jim was told, sorry, mate, you can't wear that top. Like, there's no way in hell you're wearing that top. You got to wear the normal kit, like the lower key ones or whatever. And I'd say there was no way they were letting him wear that top. No way.
What he wore at Worlds was very subtle, and he had the
Yeah.
Hoka pack on as well. So he did not seem like he was branded up for Nike. On the Nike front, Krissi, you were at TRE, did some amazing work and produced some great content for Trail Talk. We really appreciate that. But ACG are here now. We saw it at UTMB, very similar kind of style to the presence at TRE. So what do you think of, like, this time last year? There was no Nike ACG. We weren't thinking about that at all. And look where we are 12 months on.
Yeah, I mean, even just in the past month, I would say that's changed, right? Before the Gorge and the Broken Arrow prize purse announcements, we saw ACG starting to trickle in already. We knew it was happening, but we weren't talking about it and how we are now. It's a big change. I think it's a big push that big companies are really recognizing the importance of outdoor sport and trail running in our case. I think it's a big part of professionalizing the sport is we need those big companies with the money to help back it. It's exciting to see what kind of, especially I think apparel, right? The biggest story has been what I'm going to call the doily shirt, which we were talking about. No one else is really trying to innovate in apparel the way that they're now pushing themselves to do. So I think it helps push everybody forward.
Ricki, what did you think about the Nike ACG coming into trail? And then we'll come to you, Krissi, for a personal high.
Yeah, like the Nike ACG thing, it's like, what took you so long? That kind of way. That's how I feel about that. It's like Nike ACG were there years ago, and then they made a little bit of a comeback, but it was like, it was limp enough. But like then all of a sudden they're bringing out like the waffle top. They're bringing out the new shoes. They're sponsoring the bigger athletes. They're winning races wearing the waffle top. It's like they came hard, and now it's like you can't really see past them. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, where are they going next? That's what I'd like to know. It's like, how much money are you going to throw at this? You're one of the biggest brands on the face of this planet. Now you're back in trail. You're coming in hard. How much money are you going to throw at it? Because that's what I'm interested in seeing. They're sponsoring Gorge Waterfalls. They're sponsoring a couple of other races. They're sponsoring some big athletes. They're throwing money around the place like they were in road. It's going to be very cool to see what they do over the next couple of years.
Yeah, like go back a couple of years and they were outside of Western states giving away Ultraflies as like a ninja marketing move. And then this year they win states with Caleb Olson in the waffle top, and it kind of like it was a perfect kickstart of everything ACG from then right through to now. So yeah, what will we see in next year's announcements and things? That'll be pretty interesting. They have got to have UTMB on the radar. Like, how do we win UTMB? But also it's kind of interesting, what model will they follow? Hoka sponsoring the World Series feels like a real natural home for them to fight and hold on to UTMB, but they don't have Nike money, so who knows? Then Hoka have the connection with the Golden Ticket Series as well, so I think we're going to see, over the next couple of years, maybe not next year, we'll see some big changes there, I think.
Yeah, well, I think Hoka have I think Hoka have UTMB until 2028. I think that's what they have it for. So they won't be able to make moves until then anyway, you know. So they'll have to be making other moves to stay relevant, to stay like they're still coming hard, like, you know. The only issue I have is like they're going to sell the waffle top, right? And I think the waffle top is fucking deadly. I think it's class, right? I think it looks class. It's super cool. But if I see a mid-pack runner or a back-of-the-pack runner, I'm sorry, wearing that top next year, I don't know, man. Like, they can't be allowed to just go and buy that top. Like, I'm sorry, you can't. You can't be buying that top unless you're winning the race. And even if you're winning the race, you're just about getting away with it. Like, it's crazy.
You're going to see back the Packers vibing out in Norda, Oakleys, awful tops, you name it. All of the vibe kit will be on somebody. They'll be in the full kit wanker vibe gear.
Yeah, but
No
I can handle I can handle the Norda to satisfy. There's just something very unique about that waffle top. Yeah.
One more thing on Nike, Ricki brought up the point of like, how are they going to kind of take a stronghold in, I guess what you were inferring is like race sponsorship. And I would not be surprised to see ACG get behind the trail running in the Olympics effort. I would not be surprised just with them sponsoring the US Olympic teams to see them use that as their foothold in the sport next.
Interesting.
Yeah, then they're not having to compete with anybody. Also, like they're coming in on a totally new thing that they can own. We just saw Christian Allen run 209 at CIM. He would probably be trying out for a US Olympic spot in trail. You would think, yeah, I think that's a good shout. Give us a personal high and a low, Krissi.
Sure. Well, since you said high and low, I'm going to kind of do one that I couldn't really decide which it was. And this was my Tour de Géance. It felt like a low in some ways because it was my first DNF and I didn't quite know what to do with that kind of in the moment or still really now. I don't consider myself someone who gives up and I certainly didn't at that race. I actually ended up getting cut off. So it felt like maybe a negative, but then every time I think about it, I think about all the lessons I learned from that race, especially all kind of the logistics and the strategy I learned about, that multi-day continuous long ultra racing and how I can take those lessons and be successful next time. So it kind of straddled kind of, all of the emotions on the spectrum for me and sits in this place of both highs and lows.
And like it is both, but it's only a low because of the DNF, but so much about that and your journey through to that, even with the Tot Dret performance the year before, you're not signing up for a Cocodona 250 here. It's Tour de Géant. It's the hardest 200-mile mountain race in the world by a long way. I need to know, what is the plan now? Are you thinking, I gotta go back, I know what went wrong, I know where I can improve things, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an ongoing kind of discussion and thought process. I know I will definitely go back. I will definitely complete the loop. I have been trying to figure out when that will be. Part of me, as you mentioned, I've been on this kind of multi-year process to get in, to build up to that with doing Tot Dret first. And I want to keep taking that momentum, but I also know even now I'm still pretty mentally exhausted, mostly from the training process and the time it takes, of my life, of my summer to train for that. And you can't slack off on that. Even this year was way sub-ideal to what I would have wanted to do. And I don't think physically it ended up being a problem, but it's just not how the respect I want to give the race. There's still some stuff I'm figuring out as well. I've had a lot of kind of stomach health issues, which is actually what was the downfall of my race. And it's unrelated to running. And so I'm on a very multi-month process trying to figure that out. And so I hesitate to go back next year if I don't have that settled, because it ended up with me not being able to eat for a day of the race, and not being able to eat again until day 3, and it just slowed me down so much, and it became a bigger problem than I think a normal kind of, oh, I'm going to throw up and rally kind of stomach issue would. So I think my plan is, I didn't have to enter the lottery last time. I was able to kind of get those, what they call packs, kind of a direct entry from doing Tot. So I think I'm going to enter the lottery. I'm going to see how that turns out. Likelihood isn't that great being an American. So I'm just kind of going to go from there, see how I feel about it when that comes around. I think the lottery is in Jan and kind of results in, I don't know, somewhere in that Jan to March range. So I'm going to wait and see kind of what the race tells me and go from there. But I do kind of want to take a summer off. I really didn't get to race that much at all this year, just because I was so focused on kind of long, slow endurance training. So I'm kind of getting excited about just being able to do more races this year instead of one giant goal. So I lean towards waiting until 2027. But if I get in, I might just say, fuck it, we're doing 2026. Like, everything is still fresh enough on my mind. I can take, a lot of those like crewing and sleep lessons and kind of really put them into practice while I kind of remember what they were. So
If that name of yours gets pulled from that little hat, you'll be doing it. You won't be able to say no. No way. You won't be able to say no. If they pull your name from that hat, you'll be running next year. Fact.
all right, well then you'll see me in July and August in the Austa then.
You.
I hear where your head's at with that, and it is really difficult, I think, going into another year of what I would essentially feel personally is like a groundhog year of, I got to train for the same thing. It's all encompassing. You need to focus on it for so far out. And the only way you can really change the stimulus is to try training for it in a different way. So yeah, do more races and just come at it from a different perspective. Yeah, only you know the answer to that. I would love to see you maybe trying something else next year, like of similar difficulty, but maybe not tour, because you can still train for tour or a tour style event, and by doing something different, like even if it was a little bit shorter, like the Swiss Peaks 170, the Tour de Monte Rosa, you're getting that similar thing for 2 days, so
Yeah.
and also you're going to be there. These are races that are in and around UTMB as well. So just my 2 pence.
Yeah, I've definitely, I appreciate that. I've definitely given thought. I know kind of once I check the tour box, and maybe it's before, maybe it's after, but I definitely want to focus on those other races and just kind of do something that I haven't seen before, and that I'm really excited about. Another thought that I've had is I've never been interested in 100-milers. I kind of like that up to 100K or super long. I love a good 50K. So, but because of tour and because of kind of thinking about the multi-year process of training for tour, I've kind of started to get interested in those kind of Western US mountainous 100-milers as just like really good kind of training and practice exercises. So we'll see kind of what the lottery gods give me and go from there. But I definitely do want to race more this year, and that starts in the spring.
What about Bigfoot 200? Would you do an American 200?
Bigfoot was probably the first 200 that was on my radar, or maybe the only US 200 that's ever really been on my radar, because it's again a bit more of that mountainous, more interesting terrain, more varied terrain. I hesitate at this point, one, at the price point, two, at the like race infrastructure. I know you've done it, and so I've heard some good things about it, but I think it's been a while now, and things, have changed with that race, I think, a bit. And so I do hesitate. I would be more open to doing, there's a couple other 200s in the US. I think there's like an Oregon, and there's a couple others that might bring some of the similar vibes as that, with just kind of more independent race directors, which I think would be super cool. But really in the end, I'm not necessarily driven by 200s. I'm driven by tour. And so I'm not looking to do a bunch of other 200s.
Epic hard shit.
Yeah.
But it is also like, it's like when you don't get to do the loop, when you don't get to finish, you know what I mean? It's in us all. It's like, I'm no different than you, and I'm sure Aaron's the same, that if we try to do something and we just don't get to the finish line, it consumes us, and we just get obsessed, and all we want to do is go back and make those wrongs right again. You know what I mean? Like, that's how our brains work sometimes, and sometimes you won't want to move on until you've finished that loop. Like, now maybe you can, but maybe you can't.
Well, on that note, I couldn't go into this coming year thinking about running Ultra Trail Australia miler again, but I didn't want to not be there because it's like an hour away from where I live. So I entered the 100K because essentially, like, I did the first 46 of the miler, and then it, so if I do the 100K and then the 46, I'll have essentially Rickied the course over 2 years, and maybe I'll do the miler the year after. But yeah, I hear you. Ricki, we need a personal high and a low. Come on, give us something.
Well, personal high, honestly, I could list a couple of highs. Like, number one high was winning Granite Peaks early in the year to get me onto the Irish team at World Champs. And then that was me going up against some of the best runners in this country. And like, I won that race. Like, we'd say my mum had only just passed away as well, and I ran that with a little picture of her in my back pocket, you know what I mean? And that was a very, very special day and a very, very special moment for me and my family, let's say, that I get to run for Ireland again at the ripe old age of 42 and do my mum proud, you know? So that was high number one. That was like my goal race for the year, you know, because I hadn't got into States. Like, States was only a sort of a dream at that time, because I was still in the wait list. And then getting to run for Ireland at World Champs. Again, like, there's only so many people that get to run for their country, and like, that's always going to be a massive high. So they're two massive highs for me. Like, I like, ideally I'd love to have finished higher up at the Worlds, but I mean, I still had a good day. I still had a great race, and I finished first on the team, you know what I mean, for the Irish team on the long trail. And I was really, really happy with that and really proud of that. I'd like to have been further up the field, but the field was stacked. The talent, the level, the skill, everything, it's just incredible at the minute. So they're my highs, you know. And honestly, I could list a few more. Like, you know, we could talk about States and this, that, and the other. But it's the lows that stick in your brain, right? It's the lows that eat away at you. And even though you try and like push it to the side and you want to say, no, I'm grand, I had a great year, da. And I had a fucking great year. I had a brilliant year, but for one race, and that was Majorca. So what do you think I'm doing next year? I'm going back to run Majorca, because I got to finish it, but I didn't get to finish it on my terms. You know, I pulled up with an injury after about 40K when I was having what I thought was a pretty good race. And then all of a sudden my race was over, and I had to just slog it out for the next 7 hours because I wanted my stones for UTMB next year. And that was a low for me. That was a hard day, and it was a low because I was beaten by other Irish lads that, you know, I didn't want to be beaten by. I don't like getting beaten by those kind of lads. That's the competitor in me. So that was a low for me. But I'm going to right that wrong by going back there next year.
And by going back next year, you're going to be coming at it potentially with UTMB in your legs.
True, but like, this year I went at it from Worlds and then a big training camp in Fontremont, which wasn't ideal either, right? It wasn't ideal. But with UTMB, I'll have actually more time to recover and actually more time to do a better training block. So I actually think that UTMB into Majorca is actually a pretty good amount of time. Do you know what I mean? I think it's good enough that you will get the benefit of the training for UTMB and UTMB itself going into Majorca. And then I know the course now.
Look at the mind, the wee cogs turning, going, I can do this. I can nail it. But honestly, like UTMB to Mallorca, are we talking 7 weeks?
No, it's more. So UTMB is the last weekend in August, right? And then, last weekend in August. And then I think Mallorca was the last weekend in October. So how many weeks is that?
So you might be 8 or 9.
Yeah, I think it's about 9 weeks. I think there's 9 weeks there. I think that's perfect. Like, sure, like there's no different than,
The priority's going to be recovery and then a wee bit of sharpening. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I know you can do it. I know how you're able to recover from stuff, and I can't place myself in that timeline because it wouldn't work for me, but I think it might work for Ricki. Krissi, going to come to you on the sport high or low or observation, and I'll start off with one. Chinese brands this year. This time last year, we weren't thinking about Kailas. We weren't thinking about Mount the Coast. Look at the year those two brands have had. Kailas with when I say global, it's not American, but like far-reaching sponsorship of the Tour X series and multiple other races, thinking about like Vietnam Mountain Marathon, the World Trail Majors race, the shoes that they've put out, the performances and the domination really at the Tour de Jean. Like so many runners are wearing Kailas, and they aren't Chinese athletes or Asian athletes. They've got a big presence in Italy. They're sponsoring, and they have like the Kailas Fuga Mountain Club, which is hundreds of runners who are, I would say they're almost like maybe not as high a level, but could easily be at Ricki's level, where they are top performing runners with great index scores that also have a day job. Thinking of like Dave Ryan, the other Irish athlete. So they're supporting a lot of things in the sport, from great grassroots to international races and national athletes. And then Mount the Coast, they've got the R1 and what that's done on the road, but then thinking about the T1 and now the H1 that launched in September, like they've got a great selection of shoes, done some great things, thinking about Jamil Corey and the Chipotle Challenge last year, and he ran, I think it was in the H1 most of the time, and like the performances they've had in their shoes and showing up at TRE. So I just think it's been a big year for the Chinese brands that they're going to build on into next year. Excited to see the M1 launch. Krissi, what have you got there?
I think a year ago, I would have maybe put this in the potential kind of lows of the sport, just not quite being sure what motivations of bigger Chinese brands are. Is it just looking for an opportunity, a gap where they can kind of take over? But I think now I do see it as more of a positive and a high of the sport, seeing, as you were kind of pointing at, the investment of Fuga Kailas really, not just into the product, but at the community level, at the race level as well. They haven't quite penetrated, as you said, the US market, but you're seeing Mount to Coast really focus on the US market, knowing that, there's a huge pool of athletes here. There's still a need for this sustainability, durability component in shoes for athletes here who, are running a lot of races or doing more road ultras. I think it's cool, right? I think, we started to see a bit more of kind of, I hesitate to say diversification in trail running, but more representation from other countries, especially within Golden Trail, within the UTMB series. And it's nice to see brands follow that, having different perspectives from different cultures, different regions, different types of trails come in, because in the end, this is become a globalized sport. And, that means that there are good gaps to fill and good opportunities to fill by bringing in these different perspectives. And so, as I said, I think that's kind of a cool thing. I think it's going to be hard if, a brand like Kailas doesn't focus on the US market. I think they're going to have to at some point figure out that formula here in the way, Mount to Coast, we've criticized kind of how they did it initially, kind of how they just kind of threw shoes at influencers and it got the name out there, but maybe not in the right way, and how they're kind of course correcting with that. And it's, it's becoming, I would expect, fairly successful for them. But it's, it's not the easiest challenge.
Yeah, I
No,
wonder what
but
Mount the Coast's finances look like. Like, I wonder how successful are they doing, Ricki?
Yeah, it's a good question because at TRE, they had this facade that they were getting really successful, that they were getting into retailers a lot. They had a lot of salespeople there. They had a lot of traffic at their booth. You could feel the maybe facade of a momentum, but I do wonder, okay, what's their actually production volume look like? How are they selling? How are they going to do in retail stores with the everyday consumer who doesn't maybe follow all those influencers or follow road ultras or, follow, big names in the sport?
yeah, like I know when I was in America with you, Aaron, like everywhere you looked, somebody was wearing a pair of Mount Coast shoes. And I guarantee you none of them bought those shoes. They were handing everybody out shoes. They were just throwing shoes at people, I think, just to be seen, just to have them seen on feet, But I looked a lot closer, we'd say, at what Kailas was doing at UTMB in Chamonix this year. Like their brand activation was top class. It was top class. And like the way they were everywhere in Chamonix. They were on feet. They were taking people out on runs every single day of the week. But they were doing it the right way. It wasn't like they were just throwing shoes at people and saying, They were doing it the right way. And like, you can see how much like traction Kailas as a brand, as a shoe brand that people would trust. I think a lot of people now are going towards Kailas, where I think people are still a bit on the fence with Mount to Coast, So I definitely think that if Kailas do try to get into the US market, they will do it, and they will do a good job on it. I think they've been one of the brands of the year. They've come in hard. We're talking about ACG, right? We're talking about Nike, who have tons of cash, absolute tons of cash. And you're saying they're coming in hard. But I mean, Kailas came in super hard. They like sponsored 35 races or something like that this year or for next year as well. It's a crazy amount of races they're sponsoring. And then they've got all their athletes, like they've got their athletes topped up in the best of the gear. Even their like ambassadors, let's say like their lower field runners are kitted out to the nines, you know what I mean? They've got the best of the best gear that the elites are wearing. They're doing a savage job, I think.
Also, the shoes are performing. Like, if you think about the Mount to Coast as a brand, they set some long distance records and had some performances, but the Kailas Fuga EX Pro was the shoe that Christian Minajio was racing Jim in at the OCC that was leading the race. So, like, the visibility that they got from that also just highlighted, oh, this is an amazing shoe, But look, we're not here to plug Kailas. It was more an observation that they landed this year.
Yeah.
Right. Personal high for me. And then, Ricki, I'm coming to you. And you can give me a high, you can give me a low. You can give us something. Tour de Jante, fast packing. I think that was my favorite week of the year. Like, States was, I had to come down after States. Like, I needed to chill after States. The travel, the excitement, the personal battery. It was fully depleted after getting back from States in all the right ways. But spending 5 days on the Tour de Jante course, just me, meeting a room of strangers every night at dinner in the hut, out on the trail 6 to 10 hours a day, sunshine, altitude, sore legs, heavy pack. It was just like the best days of the year for me. And I actually can't wait to do it again. Like, I cannot wait to do it again, and I just want to do it bigger and better. So that was like a big high for me on the year. And then another one I'll throw out there is I really enjoyed last January covering the Winter Spine Race and following those athletes to 100 170 miles, 168 miles north along the Pennine Way. Really cold. Like I was sleeping in the camper van in down trousers. I never used the heater in my camper van. The heater was being used. Going out on the trail and seeing the runners. But I'll caveat that with a negative experience, and that was like the organizers. They granted me a media pass, but they were not helpful. Like they were, they circulated a picture of me and details about my van, make sure this person isn't allowed anywhere near aid stations. And it kind of gave like a real negative tone to it for me. But every time it just made me go out on the trail to see the athletes. And that was just, it was class. Thinking about like Kim Collison and the experience, seeing him several times along the way through to his win after years of difficulty at that race, and then having him on the podcast afterwards. So that was like a really early part of the year high for me, which I would kind of love to do it next year, but I don't like doing the same thing twice, certainly not back to back. So maybe another year I'll think about the winter spine. Ricki?
Wasn't it a cool crossover though with the spine and then Tour? It was a cool crossover that you were at both, but so were a lot of those athletes. Like there was a lot of athletes from both of those races doing both of those races, and I think that's a cool crossover, and you would have got to see them. You would have saw Kim in both of those scenarios, you know what I mean, where he was probably more suited to that winter spine rather than Tour, and probably had a much better day at the winter spine than Tour. But I just think it's very cool that you were there to witness both of those.
Yeah, seeing Kim during Tour, the last time I saw him was in the closing stages of the winter spine, and I could hardly get a word in with him at Tour because he was asking me, how I'd been and, what the crack was. I'm like, do your race. Let me just follow you. I'll talk to you after. And Kim is just one of those people who's just one of the nicest people in the sport. So yeah, great experience. Ricki, over to you.
Yeah, for me, for me, I'll tell you what was so cool. And it's a little bit soppy, right? But there's been so many events that I got to do, and I've done loads of cool shit over the last few years. Every year I say this, like, that was the best year of my life. That was the best year of my life. This was the best year. Every year it's just got better and better since I got into this sport, and every year tops the last year. But what I thought was so cool about this year was my shared experiences. Like, I got to spend more time with other people. We'll say you and me, Aaron, we got to spend weeks, damn near months together this year. Like, we were together at Dartmoor, great crack. We both ran a great race, went for a few pints after it, went for an Indian. Do you know what I mean? Class experience, unbelievable. And that was only over in the UK. But then we did that again in America, and we did it again in Chamonix. I think that you can't buy that kind of stuff. Like, I'll never forget those experiences. And then I got to do other cool stuff with Chris and Michelle, living with them and getting to be in their house, and they're obsessed with trail running. And that was just epic as well. And little Piggy and the dogs, you know what I mean?
Little Piggy.
That was so cool. Yeah. And then I got to go to the World Champs. And I was at the World Champs, and I was at the World Champs 2 years ago in Austria, and that was my first time there. So it was a bit different then because I was with a team, but it was more like I was more worried about me, as how my performance would be. Whereas in this time, it felt different. I felt, let's say, more mature and more like a leader there. And the experience I got was a more shared experience this time because it felt like I was part of a team, and I felt like I was one of the older lads in the team. There was just a lot of friendships formed there and then, you know what I mean? And I thought that was super, super cool. And then a couple of weeks later, I get to go to Fontremo, one of my best mates, Foxy, and we got to run 200 kilometers a week for 2 weeks. Epic sort of stuff. And they're just highs. And unfortunately, Aaron, I have no low. There is no low. The only low I have from this year is not doing so well at Majorca. That's it. That's the only low that I can name this year,
You're such a positive thinker that I think the highs were high and the lows are just pale insignificance to the highs, but you're a positive thinker, and that's part of your superpower as well. So we'll not push you for anything. I'm sure you've had some absolute stinkers in training, but you'll focus on the positivity, and that's one of the things that we love about you. So we'll let you have that one. Krissi, coming to you, and I'll throw a couple of things out there, but you can come back with highs, lows, sport, or personal. Do we even want to recognize the Arizona Monster 300 and the Lugaloos as the low in American Ultra Trail this year?
I think so. I mean, that was, it's funny because it didn't even come up to me because this year has felt so long. But like now that you mention it, I'm like, the repercussions of how that race went down, the organization of that race, and the toilet situation. I mean, not really much good to say, except for maybe at the front of the pack and how their performances and experiences came out. But yeah, I would say so.
And the Lugaloo reel got me a legal threat from race organizer. We're only we're only resharing information that people have shared with us. So, and we do it with a bit of banter, so you get away with it. Yeah. Any other highs and lows, Krissi, as we start to wind things down on our wonderful Christmas show recapping 2025? 59% good, 1% shit.
Lugaloos.
I've got some for sport. You kind of brought this up before, but the Joyline doping, I think, was just another reminder of one, stark resource contrasts in our sport, and education contrasts in our sport. We could always blame the athlete, but there's a systemic problem there, and there's a need for somebody to survive. And I think it's unfortunate just for the sport in general, and it's another example of how far we are from figuring out doping in trail running and having just a organizing body that's actually doing something for the sport, both like from just being a leader, an educator, a financer of the sport. And I think that's been talked about as that's one of our kind of hindrances to having trail running be an Olympic sport, is we have to figure that out. We can't just keep kind of getting by because there is doping in the sport, probably at multiple levels, from elite to sub-elite to your middle of the road runner. I think the other big letdown, which
on the doping thing, like I think obviously it's a thing, it's happening, maybe more so from the East African countries, and it was only a matter of time before we saw it in trail. But like if you think about triathlon, it's probably more the 40-something with some personal wealth that's doing the majority of the doping there. So I don't think we're just going to see more of that. It's difficult to frame whenever you can't see what actually is the solution. Like, I just think we're going to see more of it rather than progression on a solution. So I don't really have much more to say on it. Ricki, you've got something there?
Yeah, but just on it, we'd say if you were to try and flip it to a positive, like this year, there's been a lot less, but then the only problem is there's been a lot less people caught for doping, right? Whether they've been doping or not, I don't know. But I mean, there has been a lot less. So we say this time last year, you would have been saying that I think there was like 36 Kenyan athletes. This is on trail alone done for doping last year, right? Whereas in this year, there's nowhere near those numbers, So I want to say that's a good thing. I don't want to say that maybe they're just getting smarter and better and da-da-da. I want to say that maybe it's testing is getting better, it's getting stricter, it's getting tighter, and there's less athletes doping. So that's my little bit on it.
Flipped it into a positive. Love it.
Yeah. I think the thing that scares me is like starting with 2026, there's now a lot more prize money in the sport all of a sudden. And so is someone like a Nike ACG going to then help foot the bill for testing to go along with that prize money? Because they're the kind of people we need to be putting money into this. They have the know-how, they have the infrastructure to help us with that in this sport. Because otherwise you could just see people chasing money, getting that one big paycheck before they get caught. I'd hate to see that.
I think it would benefit the sport in general if like race organizers came out and spoke more about it, with ACG coming with the sponsorship. like, we don't even know if there was a conversation of we want to have drug testing. Can you fund this, or can you, if we're going to be given, tens of thousands of dollars in prize purse, it needs to be matched by proper doping controls. So are race directors asking these questions? Are they seeking that? Or are they too interested in like the new headline sponsor and the prize money? So I would love some transparency on what people are asking for, to know is, are we trying to progress it, or are we just trying to get sponsors and grow in that way? Like, are we trying to lift it all or just lift elements?
I mean,
Yeah.
I will say, at least in the case of ACG Broken Arrow, Brendan, the race director for Broken Arrow, he's already been paying out of pocket for testing for, I think it's been top 2 in all of those races in male and female categories. And that prize money payout to this point has been contingent upon those results. So that prize money hasn't been getting paid. And he has a whole page on the website outlining for the elite athletes what the process is, so that they understand they're getting tested. They're not getting paid until test results come back, in case, rankings change because of test results. So I know, at least in this case, that has been there. So hopefully that just continues. But you're right. It's really hard to lead in that, because it's very expensive, and it's one thing to talk about testing and to talk about the need for testing. But as a race director or a sponsor for a race, if you can't actually pay to have that testing, I don't know how valuable saying we need it is if you can't actually put that into action yet. So it's going to take a lot for, I think, other RDs to have that in place as well, such that they can be vocal about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brendan and Broken Arrow is a model of how you would go about organizing a race, promoting a race, absolutely world class. I would actually love, because the PTRA have this seat at the table and having these conversations with UTMB and stuff, it would be really beneficial for the sport in general to have people like Brendan in these conversations as well, rather than athletes who are maybe great at the sport but have no business knowledge, no race organizer knowledge. So like that would be maybe quite useful.
That brings up a good question that I've asked myself a couple times. Where has the PTRA been in 2025? What are they doing? Like, I feel like we had a little momentum when they kind of announced maybe that first year, but I haven't feel like I've heard anything about, what those working groups are doing, or even just if they're, making progress or having discussions. I feel like we've lost that transparency or insight.
Yeah, they could certainly do a better job at marketing, because that is what forms a perception of how good or bad they are. There's no point in them having multi-year communication with UTMB about revising the index system if we don't actually know any progress on that, on where it's going, or timelines. So I kind of agree. I would love them to just do a quarterly update, have a newsletter. For all that would take, and it would help lift the sport, I think, because it would just let people know this is what's going on behind the scenes. This is what we're working on. Ricki, over to you.
On that note, on what we're talking about, we'll say
on anything.
Yeah, it's like
we're closing it out here. So give us your final thoughts.
My final thoughts. I'm stumped now at the minute. So you're gonna have to
You just caught him off guard.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. Ricki doesn't know what to say. That's the first of the year.
Me, but I thought we were continuing that conversation about the PTRA or something like that. And then I was
you can continue whatever way you want, but we're wrapping up the show. So give us your final thoughts.
My thoughts are, I really hope that 2026 is going to be just as good, if not better, than 2025. That's on a personal level, let's say if you want to call it a professional level. I know that Trail Talk, we'll be doing our shows all next year, and it's been an amazing journey since we started, even all the way back, like I was saying, sitting in a camper van with you and Dartmoor, pre-race, talking shit and having the crack, and it's just been a roller coaster. And I mean, it's a roller coaster that I definitely am happy to be on, and I'm not I don't want to get off it just yet. You know what I mean? So I can't wait to see where that brings us next year, you know, because like I remember when you said it to me, Aaron, you said it to me, I'd say 2 years ago, and you said, buckle up, it's going to get busy. You said that to me about 2 years ago or something like that, you know, and I said to Trina, like, I'm telling you, this is going to take off. And you know what I mean? We're skyrocketing, I think, you know.
Yeah, the trajectory is this way, and we've no ambitions to slow down. We're just speeding up. We keep speeding up, doing more. Krissi, over to you. Final thoughts, closing comments.
For me, I think I said this before, I'm excited to race a bit more in 2026. Every year, I think the thing that gets me going the most is the community, both like TT community, but also just like, you know, the local community, individual races, communities. I'm just fired up to kind of give more to the sport, to participate more in the sport. You know, and just to kind of watch it continue to grow.
All right, we've lost Ricki. The poor man's battery has died, both on his phone and also in his brain. So we've had to send him to bed because Christmas is very busy, and Ricki's been swinging a hammer, making sure the money's coming in for Santa presents. For me, I mean, it's been an incredible year with Trail Talk and the community. I just love how the community exists and helps each other and just have conversations about things that I wouldn't even think about, even if it's the smallest thing of like, what's one of the most frequent questions we see on the WhatsApp, like, what's sizing like on La Sportiva? How many times has that come up in the year? But it's just these little things that, like, what are people doing? They would have been Googling it before, scrolling through pages of things, texting a friend. So it's just like this hive mind of thinking in the WhatsApp community, which I love. We've obviously got our Swiss Canyon Trail meetup next May, which is going to be incredible. There's probably going to be like 20 trail talkers there at least. So that's incredibly exciting. And I'm just feel really grateful for the year that it's been, moving from London to Australia, also still being able to travel to America and Europe. Just cost more than what I was originally thinking that it would. But we'll get over that, being able to plan ahead for next year to continue to keep the show moving forward. So yeah, appreciative of the community, the contributors, and the connections that we make that are all kind of around this incredible world of ultra trail. So we'll close it out at that, and happy Christmas, happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. And Krissi, I hope you have a great holiday period, and we will see you soon.
Happy holidays and do your snow dances.
Peace.